Why the narcissist wants you dead. I'm going to kill you. You better do it or you're dead. I wish you were dead. You're going to die. You may well have heard such threats and declarations of intent from our kind. The savage lesser, who has erupted in a volcanic reaction of ignited fury, who grabs the kitchen knife and thrusts it through the air towards his victim. The self-pitying mid-ranger, who, in a tantrum of impotence and hatred, expresses his wish that you were dead, or simply the reptilian smile of the greater with the unspoken but implicit suggestion of what might await you. Each school has its own ways of indicating that your demise is desired. Yet, is this just wishful thinking, or a solid, actionable desire to see you dead? Are these words issued more for effect than the reality of murdering you, causing an accident, or hoping that some intervening act causes you to be wiped from this mortal coil? The general position actually is that we don't want you dead in the sense of physically dead. There are notable exceptions which I shall address shortly, but it is actually very rare for those exceptions to occur. The fact is that numerous commentators believe that narcissists want you dead, and the reality is we don't. That is another myth which is held about our kind, that it is somehow our ultimate desire, our final expression of victory for us to kill you. It is, in the main, incorrect, and here's why. A dead appliance is a useless appliance. Your purpose is threefold to us, whether you are a tertiary, secondary, or primary source. You are to be controlled and to provide us with fuel, provide us with character traits, and or residual benefits. And the more important your position is in our fuel matrix, the more likely that you will provide all of those things and do so to an impressive degree. Accordingly, if you are providing us with the very things that we want and need, it makes no sense at all to render you incapable of providing them. But I hear you ask, what of the appliances, HG, that are no longer functioning in the way that we want? It's a valid question. Firstly, when you stop functioning in terms of the provision of positive fuel, you don't provide enough, frequently enough, or it runs stale, we switch to devaluation. And in those circumstances, even though we are driven by hatred and paint you black for your perceived treachery in no longer fulfilling your specified role through the provision of fuel, you still have a role to play. You become the provider of negative fuel. Secondly, you will still have a role to play with regard to the provision of character traits and residual benefits. You may be supporting the narcissist financially, taking care of the narcissist, running a household, caring for the children and other matters which not only benefit the narcissist day to day, but are very important with regard to the preservation of a facade where that is operated by mid-range and greater narcissists. Thirdly, you are required for the purpose of triangulation with our other appliances and maintaining the provision of fuel as we seek out your ultimate replacement. Now, you ask, what then when we decide to disengage? Clearly, we've no longer any desire to interact with you at all. Why not kill you then? This then leads us on to the other reasons why we choose not to kill you. 2. Notwithstanding our contempt for rules, the laws and regulations, the higher function of our kind are mindful, where greater or ultra through calculation, and middle mid-range and upper mid-range with regard to an instinctive response for the preservation of the facade, we are mindful of the adverse interference that comes from nosy law enforcement if we were to murder you. It brings unwanted scrutiny and the potential to fetter our right to do what we want, and therefore becomes a threat to our control, and the narcissism doesn't want that to happen. With greaters and ultra, the narcissism is looking further ahead, and therefore instinctively enables the narcissist to make those decisions of not pursuing those routes to avoid additional threats to control. The narcissism, in effect, sees the potential problems and ensures that they are not headed into. With the middle mid-rangers and the upper mid-range, this is more to do with the facade, that the narcissism instinctively looks to protect the facade by preventing the narcissist from going so far as to kill somebody. There's also the fact, of course, that mid-rangers are cowardly, and especially middle mid-rangers and upper mid-range aren't going to want to get their hands dirty or bloodied by such behaviour. Accordingly, for mid-range and greater narcissists, the narcissism operates, albeit in different ways, to usually prevent the narcissist from bringing along further threats to control. Remember, narcissism is a self-defense mechanism, and if in asserting control it brings about further additional threats to control, it's not doing its job properly. Number 3, we can actually treat you as dead without the inconvenience and problems that might arise from that of actually physically killing you. We effectively delete you when we concentrate on the new intimate partner primary source throughout the golden period. Accordingly, by ignoring you, removing you from social media postings, blocking you, not answering your messages or calls, then we have killed you. And this enables us to assert control without incurring additional threats to our control, a far more satisfactory outcome. Number 4, you are kept alive for the inevitable hoover. Although the narcissists at a lesser mid-range are not looking to that hoover in the future, it is a collateral consequence of not getting rid of you in the fullest sense in the instant. Although wanting to see you interact with you or indeed do anything with you at all is generally speaking last on our list when we've disengaged from you, unconsciously there remains that advantage to be achieved by keeping you alive, so that there is the potential for a hoover at a later juncture. The narcissism in effect sticks you into cold storage to be resurrected as and when is required. Remember, you belong to us. And whilst we may well have treated you as our object very shoddily indeed, we don't want to, intentionally at least, put you beyond in a position of irreparable repair. And consequently, the narcissism allows you to be placed to one side unconsciously so that you can be drawn on at a later stage should the need arise, and invariably it does because of the dynamic that you have with the narcissist. You can be hoovered in the future for positive or negative fuel, and this may occur as well as bringing you back into the formal relationship to acquire the other aspects of the prime aims more solidly. Remember, there has been considerable investment in you, and whilst we kill you in effect by putting you from our minds during the golden period with the new intimate partner primary source, we will ultimately, guided by our narcissism, want to draw down on our investment in due course. Accordingly, there's no point physically killing you. 5. There are alternative methods where we can in effect murder you without the potential risk to liberty. The key ways that this is done are as follows: character assassination, smearing, silent treatments, and devaluation as a whole. Thus, whilst we don't physically kill you, we slay your character, your reputation, your self-worth, your sense of existence, your connection to us, and we still are able to draw fuel from you, something we could not do if you were physically dead. 5. Punishment. By you remaining alive, we have somebody that we can punish. This asserts and maintains our sense of control. It enables us to continue to draw fuel, and therefore allows the narcissist to feel a sense of achievement and, in certain instances, retribution against you. It also means that we can continue to punish you should you continue to threaten our control. And this is something that could not be done if we were to actually murder you. Furthermore, if you have done something that has caused such significant wounding, then if you were dead, we would not be able to mete out repeated malign hoovers against you as we apply the punishment against you. 6. By stating our intent or our desire to kill you, this simple form of threat, largely issued by mid-rangers, carries with it the ability to gain fuel from provoking a reaction from you, but also allows the assertion of control. It is a simple sentence, but one which carries significant power with it. This low usage of energy with maximum impact appeals hugely to the mid-range of our kind and to some degree the lesser, and therefore it makes far more sense for a narcissist to threaten than to actually execute. The greater and the ultra never issue a spoken threat. It is implicit in the type of individual they are, and therefore it is usually in the mind of the victim, but with good reason, that something terrible could happen, even though the greater the ultra makes no mention of it. When the threat is issued in that moment, the narcissist may very well believe that they want to kill you or see you dead because of the threat to control that you have caused, and therefore the reaction in uttering those words is entirely in accordance with the desire, but it is never executed, because to execute it actually goes against our fundamental needs, and our narcissism prevents that happening. Thus, for all of the reasons that I have just explained, whilst the narcissist might say that he or she wants you dead, or that they want to kill you, the reality is we do not, and we will not. This is the general rule. However, as with all rules, there are exceptions. And therefore, what are the exceptions where this desire to kill is actually acted on and a victim is killed? 1. The loss of control through ignited fury. Essentially, the narcissist hasn't intended for death to occur, but it is a collateral consequence of the haphazard application of the assertion of control. Whilst the ignition of fury can potentially result in any school of narcissist entering a frenzy, whereby there is the commission of physical violence, it is the lesser narcissist that is most likely to murder as a consequence of the loss of control. This does not mean that all lessers will kill, but rather of all the schools, when there is a serious loss of control resulting in the ignition of fury, then the lesser will lash out and there is a potential risk of causing death. The fuel arising from the act as he stabs, bludgeons, throttles or beats will be significant, but not enough to heal the wound that has resulted in the ignition of fury and the loss of control, meaning that the murderous act continues until the victim lies dead. Although that is the ultimate assertion of control, for the reasons that I have explained earlier, it then brings with it additional problems. However, the fact is, in that particular instance, the narcissist has lost control and then has sought to assert control and has asserted the control too far, resulting in the death of the victim. Accordingly, of course, the fuel halts from this deceased victim. The narcissist may gain fuel from the reaction of witnesses, but ultimately that burst of fuel has now gone with the demise of the victim. The murdering lesser may use the fact of his killing to gain fuel in the future, but as of now, he has just lost a major appliance if, for instance, he's murdered his IPPS, and therefore he actually risks going into a fuel crisis if he doesn't achieve fuel from alternative sources. His narcissism, being more unwieldy, rudimentary, and in effect a blunt instrument, needed him to assert control, and in so doing, it went too far, resulting in death. The death wasn't actually intended. This is, for instance, where, in certain instances of domestic violence, the husband is found still with a kitchen knife in his hand, stood over the body of the deceased victim, panting, gasping, as the realization hits him of what has actually happened. He lost control because his fury was ignited to such an extent that the outcome is one that the extent of the wounding was so great, his fury ignited, and he lost control. He tried to assert control, and indeed he has, because he's killed the victim. That's the ultimate assertion of control, but it went too far. Ordinarily, he could have been able to assert control without causing the death. This time, the narcissism resulted in the application of the assertion of control causing death. It wasn't intended, it was a collateral consequence. 2. Going, gone. There are circumstances where the narcissist recognizes that the major fuel provider, invariably the primary source, is on the way out, and thus the fuel is going to be lost anyway. This is not the situation where the appliance is escaping or leaving. The narcissistic perspective of you always belonging to us means that your escape, leaving, or departure is not something that will happen because we control you, and we will bring you back under our control through an initial grant hoover or through follow-up hoovers from our perspective. Thus, if someone is about to escape, move away, etc., this isn't applicable. The situation of going, gone applies to where the appliance is at risk of dying. There are two clear situations where this arises: terminal injury or illness and suicide. In respect of terminal injury or illness, the narcissist knows that the fuel source will not be around for much longer, and therefore helps this person on their way, and this would appeal to particular narcissists. There also has to be a benefit associated with such an act, namely doing it as an act of revenge for wounding, the assertion of control, punishing for railing against the narcissist's control, and such like. With regard to suicide, if the narcissist recognises the victim is at a very low ebb, and therefore is likely to end their own life, and thus deprive the narcissist of control and view in what is seen as one final act of defiance, the narcissist may then actually encourage that individual to take their own life and push them over the edge. This is very rare, but it does happen. It accords with the desire on the part of the narcissist to achieve control, to punish and therefore gain revenge. This punishment and revenge goes beyond that normally experienced and would be as a consequence of a major threat of exposure or wounding, i.e., this person going and taking the control away from the narcissist. Thus, if an individual is in a position whereby suicidal ideation occurs, the narcissist is aware of this and unconsciously, with lesser or mid-range, consciously with greater or ultra, recognizes that there is an imminent and substantial and permanent loss of control, and therefore the narcissist, in accordance with their view of being a god, a godlike view of themselves, and the need to assert control, will then pressure, control, encourage and manipulate to push the victim over the edge so that he or she commits suicide, which then enables the narcissist to feel that they were the ones that asserted control, and therefore the massive wounding is evaded. 3. Malice. The greater or ultra wants you dead. There is no going, gone scenario which would be harnessed by any of the schools of narcissists. In this instance, the malicious and calculating greater or ultra has determined that your death is required. Again, this is very rare. The greater and ultra will have evaluated that the loss of a useful appliance is offset by the need to disincentivize this individual. There will be no clumsy, rage-filled lesser bludgeoning or pillow-smothering mid-ranger with the dying cancer adherent. Here, the greater or ultra sees you as a problem, an obstacle which must be removed, and that you could not be removed in any other way. Usually, it will be because the greater or ultra recognizes that you have access to information that will cause him or her considerable difficulty, or that you have the ability to create a significant exposure problem. The greater or ultra will not go down this route lightly. Instead, he or she will first look to manipulate the situation in an alternative manner, but ultimately, the greater's malicious core, the need for the maintenance of the status quo, and the superiority means that sometimes there is a need to remove an individual completely. It may be made to look like an accident. It may be subtle. It may even involve a contract killing. But certain individuals, on very rare occasions, will be removed because they pose a threat to the greater's plans and control. The individual may be a romantic appliance. This does happen, but more usually, where the greater or ultra does this, it appertains to a business rival, a commercial rival, a political rival, a military rival. And therefore, where that individual's removal is deemed necessary by the greater or ultra, and this outweighs the benefit of being able to manipulate them through any other means, then they will be disincentivized. Accordingly, to answer the question why narcissist wants you dead, it's actually the case that most of the time the narcissist does not want you dead, because you're much more used to us alive than dead, and because the narcissism wants to avoid the further problems that can occur. But where it does happen, it is as a consequence of the loss of control through ignited fury, a going gun scenario, or the malice that I have just described. But understand, those are very rare, and more usually, it is just a threat. One that should be taken seriously, of course, but it is just a threat that is utilised towards you, or a comment made in the heat of the moment. You are much more used to us alive than you are dead. I'm H.G. Tudor. Thank you for listening.